Okay, so this is part 9 of Little Women, and we are currently on chapter 16. So at the end of chapter 15, we kind of heard that Joe's and all of their dad is sick, and he was really sick from the army, and now he's in the hospital, and we kind of just saw that Mrs. March just left to go be with him, and Joe cut off all of her hair to help her and give money to her for her trip. Okay, so chapter 16 is called Letters. In the cold gray dawn, the sisters lit their lamp and read their chapter with an earnestness never felt before. For now, the shadow of a real trouble had come. The little books were full of help and comfort, and as they dressed, they agreed to say their goodbye cheerfully and hopefully, and send their mother on her anxious journey, unsaddened by tears or complaints from them. Everything seemed very strange when they went down, so dim and still outside, so full of light and bustle within. Breakfast at that early hour seemed odd, and even Hannah's familiar face looked unnatural as she flew about her kitchen with her nightcap on. The big trunk stood ready in the hall, Mother's cloak and bonnet lay on the sofa, and Mother herself sat trying to eat, but looking so pale and worn with sleeplessness and anxiety that the girls found it very hard to keep their resolution. Meg's eyes kept filling in spite of herself. Jo was obliged to hide her face in the kitchen roller more than once, and the little girls wore a grave, troubled expression as if sorrow was a new experience to them. Nobody talked much, but as the time drew very near, and they sat waiting for the carriage, Mrs. March said to the girls, who were all busied about her, one folding her shawl, another smoothing out the strings of her bonnet, a third pulling on her overshoes, and a fourth fastening up her traveling bag. "Children, I leave you to Hannah's care and Mr. Lawrence's protection. Hannah is faithfulness itself, and our good neighbor will guide you as if you were his own. I have no fears for you, yet I am anxious that you should take this trouble rightly. Don't grieve and fret when I am gone, or think that you can be idle and comfort yourselves by being idle and trying to forget. Go on with your work as usual, for work is a blessed solace. Hope and keep busy, and whatever happens, remember that you never can be fatherless." "Yes, Mother." "Meg, dear, be prudent, watch over your sisters, consult Hannah, and in any perplexity, go to Mr. Lawrence. Be patient, Jo, and don't get despondent or do rash things. Write to me often and be my brave girl, ready to help and cheer all. Beth, comfort yourself with your music, and be faithful to the little home duties. And you, Amy, help all you can, be obedient, and keep Happy safe at home." "We will, Mother, we will." The rattle of an approaching carriage made them all start and listen. That was the hard minute, but the girls stood it well. No one cried, and no one ran away or uttered a lamentation, though their hearts were very heavy as they sent loving messages to Father, remembering, as they spoke, that it might be too late to deliver them. They kissed their mother quietly, clung about her tenderly, and tried to wave their hands cheerfully when she drove away. Laurie and his grandfather came over to see her off, and Mr. Brooke looked so strong and sensible that the girls christened him Mr. Greatheart on the spot. "Goodbye, my darlings. God bless and keep us all," whispered Mrs. March, as she kissed one dear little face after the other, and hurried into the carriage. As she rolled away, the sun came out, and looking back, she saw it shining on the group at the gate like a good omen. They saw it also, and smiled and waved their hands, and the last thing she beheld as she turned the corner was the 4 bright faces, and behind them, like a bodyguard, old Mr. Lawrence, faithful Hannah, and devoted Laurie. "How kind everyone is to us," she said, turning to find fresh proof of it in the respectful sympathy of the young man's face. "I don't see how they can help it," returned Mr. Brooke, laughing so infectiously that Mrs. March could not help smiling. And so the journey began, with good omens of sunshine, smiles, and cheerful words. "I feel as if there had been an earthquake," said Jo, as their neighbors went home to breakfast, leaving them to rest and refresh themselves. "It seems as if half the house was gone," added Meg forlornly. Beth opened her lips to say something, but could only point to the pile of nicely mended hose which lay on Mother's table, showing that even in her last hurried moments, she had thought and worked for them. It was a little thing, but it went straight to their hearts, and in spite of their brave resolutions, they all broke down and cried bitterly. Hannah wisely allowed them to relieve their feelings, and when the shower showed signs of clearing up, she came to the rescue, armed with a coffee pot. "Now, my dear young ladies, remember what your ma said and don't fret. Come have a cup of coffee all round, and then let's fall to work and be a credit to the family." Coffee was a treat, and Hannah showed great tact in making it that morning. No one could resist her persuasive nods or the fragrant invitation issuing from the nose of the coffee pot. They drew up to the table, exchanged their handkerchiefs for napkins, and in 10 minutes were all right again. Hope and keep busy. That's the motto for us. So let's see who will remember it best. I shall go to Aunt March, as usual. "Oh, won't she lecture, though," said Jo, as she sipped with a returning spirit. "I shall go to my King's, though I'd much rather stay at home and attend to things here," said Meg, wishing she hadn't made her eyes so red. "No need of that. Beth and I can keep the house perfectly well," put in Amy with an important air. "Hannah will tell us what to do, and we'll have everything nice when you come home," added Beth, getting out her mop and dish tub without delay. "I think anxiety is very interesting," observed Amy, eating sugar pensively. The girls couldn't help laughing, and felt better for it, for though Meg shook her head at the young lady who could find consolation in a sugar bowl. The sight of the turnovers made Jo sober again, and when the two went out to their daily tasks, they looked sorrowfully back at the window where they were accustomed to see their mother's face. It was gone, but Beth had remembered the little household ceremony, and there she was, nodding away at them like a rosy-faced mandarin. "That's so like my Beth," said Jo, waving her hat with a grateful face. "Goodbye, Maggie. I hope the Kings won't strain today. Don't fret about Father, dear," she added, as they parted. "And I hope Aunt March won't croak. Your hair is becoming, and it looks very boyish and nice," returned Meg, trying not to smile at the curly head, which looked comically small on her sister's tall shoulders. "That's my only comfort." And touching her hat a la Laurie, away went Jo, feeling like a shorn sheep on a wintry day. News from their father comforted the girls very much, for though dangerously ill, the presence of the best and tenderest of nurses had already done him good. Mr. Brooke sent a bulletin every day, and as the head of the family, Meg insisted on reading the dispatches, which grew more cheerful as the week passed. At first, everyone was eager to write, and plump envelopes were carefully poked into the letter-box by one or other of the sisters, who felt rather important with their Washington correspondence. As one of these packets contained characteristic notes from the party, we will rob an imaginary mail and read them. "My dearest mother, it is impossible to tell you how happy your last letter made us, for the news was so good we couldn't help laughing and crying over it. How very kind Mr. Brooke is, and how fortunate that Mr. Lawrence's business detains him near you so long, since he is so useful to you and Father. The girls are all as good as gold. Jo helps me with sewing and insists on doing all sorts of hard jobs. I should be afraid she might overdo, if I didn't know her moral fit wouldn't last long. Beth is as regular about her tasks as a clock, and she never forgets what you told her. She grieves about Father, and looks sober except when she's at her little piano. Amy minds me nicely, and I take great care of her. She does her own hair, and I am teaching her to make buttonholes and mend her stockings. She tries very hard, and I know you will be pleased with her improvement when you come. Mr. Lawrence watches over us like a motherly old hen, as Jo says, and Laurie is very kind and neighborly. He and Jo keep us merry, for we get pretty blue sometimes, and feel like orphans with you so far away. Hannah is a perfect saint. She does not scold at all, and always calls me Miss Margaret, which is quite proper, you know, and treats me with respect. We are all well and busy, but we long, day and night, to have you back. Give my dearest love to Father, and believe me, ever your own, Meg. This note, prettily written on scented paper, was a great contrast to the next, which was scribbled on a big sheet of thin foreign paper, ornamented with blots and all manners of flourishes in curly-tailed letters. My precious Marmee, 3 cheers for dear Father. Brooke was a trump to telegraph right off, and let us know the minute he was better. I rushed up the garret when the letter came, and tried to thank God for being so good to us, but I can only cry and say, I'm glad. Didn't that do as well as a regular prayer? For I felt a great many in my heart. We have such funny times, and now I can enjoy them, for everyone is so desperately good. It's like living in a nest of turtle doves. You laugh to see Meg head the table and try to be motherish. She gets prettier every day, and I'm in love with her sometimes. The children are regular archangels, and I'm Joe, and never shall be anything else. Oh, I must tell you that I came near having a quarrel with Laurie. I freed my mind about a silly little thing, and he was offended. I was right, but didn't speak as I ought, and he marched home, saying he wouldn't come again till I begged pardon. I declared I wouldn't, and got mad. It lasted all day. I felt bad and wanted you very much. Laurie and I are both so proud it's hard to beg pardon, but I thought he'd come to it, for I was in the right. He didn't come, and just at night, I remembered what you said when Amy fell into the river. I read my little book, felt better, resolved not to let the sun set on my anger, and ran over to tell Laurie I was sorry. I met him at the gate, coming for the same thing. We both laughed, begged each other's pardon, and felt all good and comfortable again. I made a poem yesterday when I was helping Hannah wash, and as Father likes my silly little things, I put it in to amuse him. Give him my lovingest hug that ever was, and kiss yourself a dozen times for your topsy-turvy Joe. A song from the Suds. Queen of my tub, I merrily sing, while the white foam rises high, and sturdily wash and rinse and wring, and fasten the clothes to dry. Then out in the free, fresh air they swing, under the sunny sky. I wish we could wash from our hearts and souls the stains of the week away, and let the water and air by their magic make ourselves as pure as they. Then on the glorious earth there would be indeed a glorious washing day. Along the path of a useful life, will heart's ease ever bloom? The busy mind has no time to think of sorrow or care or gloom, and anxious thoughts may be swept away as bravely as we wield a broom. I am glad a task to me is given to labor at day by day, for it brings me health and strength and hope, and I cheerfully learn to say, head you may think, heart you may feel, but hand you shall work away. Dear Mother, there is only room for me to send my love, and some pressed pansies from the root I have been keeping in the house for Father to see. I read every morning, try to be good all day, and sing myself to sleep with Father's tune. I can't sing Land of the Leal now. It makes me cry. Everyone is kind, and we are as happy as we can be without you. Amy wants the rest of the page, so I must stop. I didn't forget to cover the holders, and I wind the clock and air the rooms every day. Kiss dear Father on the cheek, as on the cheek he calls mine. Oh, do come soon. To your loving little Beth. Ma chérie, Mama. We are all well. I do my lessons always, and never corroborate the girls. Meg says I mean contradict, so I put in both words, and you can take the properest. Meg is a great comfort to me, and lets me have jelly every night at tea, so it's so good for me, Joe says, because it keeps me sweet-tempered. Laurie is not as respectful as he ought to be. Now I am almost in my teens. He calls me chick and hurts my feelings by talking French to me very fast when I say merci or bonjour, as Hattie King does. The sleeves of my blue dress were all worn out, and Meg put in new ones. But the full front came wrong, and they are more blue than the dress. I feel bad, but I do not fret I bear my troubles well, but I do wish Hannah would put more starch in my aprons and have buckwheats every day. Can't she? Didn't I make that interrogation point nice? Meg says my punctuation and spelling are disgraceful, but I am mortified. But dear me, I've many things to do. I can't stop. Adieu. I send heaps of love to Papa. Your affectionate daughter, Amy Curtis March. Dear Miss March, I just drop off a line to say we get on a first rate. The girls is clever and fly round right smart. Miss Mag is going to make a proper good housekeeper. She has the liking for it and gets the hang of things surprising quick. Joe doos beat all for going ahead, but she don't stop to calculate fust, and you never know where she's like to bring up. She'd done out a tub of clothes on Monday, but she starched them before they were wrenched, and blued a pink calico dress till I thought I should have died laughing. Beth is the best of little creeters, and the sight of to help me, being so forehanded and dependable. She tries to learn everything, and really goes to market beyond her years. Likewise keeps accounts, with my help, quite wonderful. We have gotten on very economical so far. I don't think the girls have coffee only once a week, according to your wish, and keep 'em on plain, wholesome victuals. Amy does well without frettin', wearin' her best clothes and eatin' sweet stuff. Mr. Lorry is full of dittos as usual, and turns the house upside down frequent, but he heartens the girls, so I let him have full swing. The old gentleman sends heaps of things, and is rather wearin', but he means wall, and it ain't my place to say nothin'. My bread is riz, so no more at this time. I send my duty to Mr. March, and hope he's seen the last of his pneumonia. Yours respectful, Hannah Mullet, head nurse of Ward No. 2. Also read on the Rappahannock, troops in fine condition, commissary department well conducted, the home guard under Colonel Teddy always on duty. Commander-in-Chief General Lawrence reviews the Army daily. Quartermaster Mullet keeps in order the camp, and Major Lyon does picket duty at night. A salute of 24 guns was fired on receipt of good news from Washington, and a dress parade took place at headquarters. Commander-in-Chief sends best wishes, in which he is heartily joined by Colonel Teddy. Dear Madame, the little girls are all well. Beth and my boy report daily. Hannah is a model servant, and guards pretty Meg like a dragon. Glad the fine weather holds. Pray make Brooke useful, and your draw on me for funds, if expenses exceed your estimate. Don't let your husband want anything. Thank God he is mending. Your sincere friend and servant, James Lawrence. Okay. Chapter 17. Little Faithful. For a week, the amount of virtue in the old house would have supplied the neighborhood. It was really amazing, for everyone seemed in a heavenly frame of mind, and self-denial was all the fashion. Relieved of their first anxiety about their father, the girls insensibly relaxed their praiseworthy efforts a little, and began to fall back into old ways. They did not forget their motto, but hoping and keeping busy seemed to grow easier, and after such tremendous exertions, they felt that the endeavor deserved a holiday, and gave it a good many. Joe caught a bad cold through neglect to cover the shorn head enough, and was ordered to stay at home till she was better, for Aunt March didn't like to hear people read with colds in their heads. Joe liked this, and after an energetic rummage from garret to cellar, subsided on the sofa to nurse her cold with arsenicum and books. Amy found that housework and art did not go well together, and returned to her mud pies. Meg went daily to her pupils, and sewed, or thought she did, at home, but much time was spent in writing long letters to her mother, or reading the Washington dispatches over and over. Beth kept on, with only slight relapses into idleness or grieving. All little duties were faithfully done each day, and many of her sisters also, for they were forgetful, and the house seemed like a clock whose pendulum was gone a-visiting. When her heart got heavy with longings for mother or fears for father, she went away into a certain closet, hid her face in the folds of a dear old gown, and made her little moan and prayed her little prayer quietly by herself. Nobody knew what cheered her up after a sober fit, but everyone felt how sweet and helpful Beth was, and fell into a way of going to her for comfort or advice in their small affairs. All were unconscious that this experience was a test of character, and when their first excitement was over, they felt that they had done well and deserved praise. So they did, but their mistake was in ceasing to do well, and they learned this lesson through with much anxiety and regret. Meg, I wish you'd go and see the Hummels. You know Mother told us not to forget them, said Beth, 10 days after Mrs. March's departure. I'm too tired to go this afternoon, replied Meg, rocking comfortably as she sewed. Can't you, Joe? Asked Beth. Too stormy for me with my cold. I thought it was almost well. It's well enough for me to go out with Laurie, but not well enough to go to Hummel's, said Joe, laughing, but looking a little ashamed of her inconsistency. "Why don't you go yourself?" asked Meg. "I've been every day, but the baby is sick, and I don't know what to do for it. Mrs. Hummel goes away to work, and Lottchen takes care of it, but it gets sicker and sicker, and I think you or Hannah ought to go." Beth spoke earnestly, and Meg promised that she would go tomorrow. "Ask Hannah for some nice little mess, and take it round, Beth. The air will do you good," said Joe, adding apologetically, "I'd go, but I want to finish my writing." "My head aches, and I'm tired, so I thought maybe some of you would go," said Beth. "Amy will be in presently, and she will run down for us," suggested Meg. So Beth lay down on the sofa, the others returned to their work, and the Hummels were forgotten. An hour passed. Amy did not come. Meg went to her room to try on a new dress. Jo was absorbed in her story, and Hannah was sound asleep before the kitchen fire, when Beth quietly put on her hood, filled her basket with odds and ends for the poor children, and went out into the chilly air with a heavy head and a grieved look in her patient eyes. It was late when she came back, and no one saw her creep upstairs and shut herself into her mother's room. Half an hour after, Jo went to Mother's closet for something, and found little Beth sitting on the medicine chest, looking very grave, with red eyes and a camphor bottle in her hand. "Christopher Columbus, what's the matter?" cried Jo, as Beth put out her hand as if to warn her off, and asked quickly, "You've had the scarlet fever, haven't you?" "Years ago, when Meg did. Why?" "Then I'll tell you. Oh, Jo, the baby's dead." "What baby?" "Mrs. Hummel's. It died in my lap before she got home," cried Beth with a sob. "Poor dear, how dreadful for you. I ought to have gone," said Jo, taking her sister in her arms, as she sat down in her mother's big chair with a remorseful face. "It wasn't dreadful, Jo, only so sad. I saw in a minute it was sicker, but Lottchen said her mother had gone for a doctor, so I took baby and let Lottie rest. It seemed asleep, but all of a sudden it gave a little cry and trembled, and then lay very still. I tried to warm its feet, and Lottie gave it some milk, but it didn't stir, and I knew it was dead." "Don't cry, dear. What did you do?" "I just sat and held it softly till Mrs. Hummel came with the doctor. He said it was dead, and looked at Heinrich and Minna, who have sore throats. 'Scarlet fever, ma'am. Ought to have called me before,' he said crossly. Mrs. Hummel told him she was poor, and had tried to cure the baby herself, but now it's too late, and she can only ask him to help the others, and trust to charity for his pay. He smiled then, and was kinder, but it was very sad, and I cried with them till he turned round all of a sudden, and told me to go home and take belladonna right away, or I'd have the fever." "No, you won't," cried Jo, hugging her close with a frightened look. "Oh, Beth, if you should be sick, I could never forgive myself. What shall we do?" "Don't be frightened. I guess I shan't have it badly. I looked in Mother's book and saw that it begins with headache, sore throat, and queer feelings like mine, so I did take some belladonna, and I feel better," said Beth, laying her cold hands on her hot forehead, trying to look well. "If Mother was only at home!" exclaimed Jo, seizing the book and feeling that Washington was an immense way off. She read a page, looked at Beth, felt her head, peeped into her throat, and then said gravely, "You've been over the baby every day for more than a week, and among the others who are going to have it, so I'm afraid you are going to have it, Beth. I'll call Hannah. She knows all about sickness. Don't let Amy come. She never had it, and I should hate to give it to her. Can't you and Meg have it over again?" asked Beth anxiously. "I guess not. Don't care if I do. Serve me right, selfish pig, to let you go and stay writing rubbish myself," muttered Jo, as she went to consult Hannah. The good soul was wide awake in a minute, and took the lead at once, assuring that there was no need to worry. Everyone had scarlet fever, and if rightly treated, nobody died, all of which Jo believed, and felt very much relieved as they went up to call Meg. "Now, I'll tell you what we'll do," said Hannah, when she had examined and questioned Beth. "We will have Dr. Bangs just to take a look at you, dear, and see that we start right. Then we'll send Amy off to Aunt March's for a spell, to keep her out of harm's way, and one of you girls can stay at home and amuse Beth for a day or two." "I shall stay, of course. I'm oldest," began Beth, looking anxious and self-reproachful. "I shall, because it's my fault she's sick. I told Mother I'd do the errands, and I haven't," said Jo decidedly. "Which will you have, Beth? There ain't no need of but one," said Ed Hannah. "Joe, please," and Beth leaned her head against her sister with a contented look, which effectually settled that point. "I'll go and tell Amy," said Meg, feeling a little hurt, yet rather relieved on the whole, for she did not like nursing, and Joe did. Amy rebelled outright and passionately declared that she'd rather have the fever than go to Aunt March. Meg reasoned, pleaded, and commanded, all in vain. Amy protested that she would not go, and Meg left her in despair to ask Hannah what should be done. Before she came back, Laurie walked into the parlor to find Amy sobbing, with her head in the sofa cushions. She told her story, expecting to be consoled, but Laurie only put his hands in his pocket and walked about the room, whistling softly as he knit his brows deep in thought. Presently he sat down beside her and said, in his most wheedlesome tone, "Now be a sensible little woman and do as they say. No, don't cry, but hear what a jolly plan I've got. You go to Aunt March's, and I'll come and take you out every day, driving or walking, and we'll have capital times. Won't that be better than moping here?" "I don't wish to be sent off, as if I was in the way," began Amy in an injured voice. "Bless your heart, child, it's to keep you well. You don't want to be sick, do you?" "No, I'm sure I don't, but I dare say I shall be, for I've been with Beth all the time." "That's the very reason you ought to go away at once, so that you may escape it. Change of air and care will keep you well, I dare say. Or if it does not entirely, you will have the fever more lightly. I advise you to be off as soon as you can, for scarlet fever is no joke, miss." "But it's dull at Aunt March's, and she's so cross," said Amy, looking rather frightened. "It won't be dull with me popping in every day to tell you how Beth is, and take you out gallivanting. The old lady likes me, and I'll be as sweet as possible to her, so she won't peck at us, whatever we do. Will you take me out in the trotting wagon with Puck, on my honor as a gentleman? And come every single day? See if I don't. And bring me back the minute Beth is well. The identical minute. And go to the theater, truly? 12 theaters, if we may." "Well, I guess I will," said Amy slowly. "Good girl. Call Meg and tell her you'll give in," said Laurie, with an approving pat, which annoyed Amy more than the giving in. Meg and Joe came running down to behold the miracle which had been wrought, and Amy, feeling very precious and self-sacrificing, promised to go if the doctor said Beth was going to be ill. "How is the little dear?" asked Laurie, for Beth was his especial pet, and he felt more anxious about her than he liked to show. "She is lying down on Mother's bed, and feels better. The baby's death troubled her, but I dare say she has only got a cold. Hannah says she thinks so, but she looks worried, and that makes me fidgety," answered Meg. "What a trying world it is," said Joe, rumpling up her hair in a fretful way. "No sooner do we get out of one trouble than down comes another. There doesn't seem to be anything to hold on to when Mother's gone, so I'm all at sea." "Well, don't make a porcupine of yourself. It isn't becoming. Settle your wig, Joe, and tell me if I shall telegraph to your mother or do anything," asked Laurie, who never had been reconciled with the loss of his friend's one beauty. That is what troubles me," said Meg. "I think we ought to tell her if Beth is really ill, but Hannah says we mustn't, for Mother can't leave Father, and it will only make them anxious. Beth won't be sick long, and Hannah knows just what to do, and Mother said we were to mind her, so I suppose we must, but it doesn't seem quite right to me." "Well, I can't say. Suppose you ask Grandfather after the doctor has been." "We will. Joe, go and get Dr. Bangs at once," commanded Meg. "We can't decide anything till he has been." "Stay where you are, Joe. I'm errand boy to this establishment," said Laurie, taking up his cap. "I'm afraid you are busy," began Meg. "No, I've done my lessons for the day." "Do you study in vacation time?" asked Joe. "I follow the good example my neighbor set me," was Laurie's answer, as he swung himself out of the room. "I have great hopes for my boy," observed Joe, watching him fly over the fence with an approving smile. "He does very well, for a boy," was Meg's somewhat ungracious answer, for the subject did not interest her. Dr. Bangs came, and said Beth had symptoms of the fever, but he thought she would have it lightly, though he looked sober over the Hummel story. Amy was ordered off at once and provided with something to ward off danger. She departed in great state, with Joe and Laurie as escort. Aunt March received them all with her usual hospitality. "What do you want now?" she asked, looking sharply over her spectacles, while the parrot, sitting on the back of her chair, called out, "Go away, no boys allowed here." Laurie retired to the window, and Joe told her story. "No more than I expected, if you were allowed to go poking about among poor folks all day. Amy can stay and make herself useful if she isn't sick, which I've no doubt she will be. Looks like it now. Don't cry, child. It worries me to hear people sniff." Amy was on the point of crying, but Laurie slyly pulled the parrot's tail, which caused Polly to utter an astonished croak and call out, "Bless my boots," in such a funny way that she laughed instead. "What do you hear from your mother?" asked the old lady gruffly. "Father is much better," replied Joe, trying to keep sober. "Oh, is he? Well, that won't last long, I fancy. March never had any stamina," was the cheerful reply. "Ha ha, never say die. Take a pinch of snuff. Goodbye, goodbye," squalled Polly, dancing on her perch and clawing at the old lady's cap as Laurie tweaked him in the rear. "Hold your tongue, you disrespectful old bird. And Joe, you'd better go at once. It isn't proper to be gadding about so late with a rattle-pated boy like—" "Hold your tongue, you disrespectful old bird," cried Polly, tumbling off the chair with a bounce and running to peck the rattle-pated boy, who was shaking with laughter at the last speech. "I don't think I can bear it, but I'll try," thought Amy, as she was left alone with Aunt March. "Get along, you fright," screamed Polly, and at that rude speech, Amy could not restrain a sniff. So that's the end of part 9, and in the next part, we will pick up with chapter 18.